Hello and welcome to the Highway to Health Show. My guest for today is Silke Glaab, an executive coach and consulting psychologist who helps leaders reach peak performance by removing burnout, anxiety, and stress from them and their teams. Silke trained with a broad range of international experts like the world-renowned therapist Marissa Peer and Professor Dr. Justin Kennedy from Applied Neuroscience Coaching. She is a recognized member of Forbes Coaches Council and a rapid transformational therapy practitioner. In this interview, we talk about mental health, burnout, and stress, mostly in work environments, how to recognize it, how to seek out help, and why it is important. We also explore the shame that surrounds mental health issues in work and the feelings of inadequacy that come with it. Now, before we go into today's episode, I want to remind you that we are still taking applications for a group coaching program. To learn more and to apply, just head on over to dre.show/coach. In any case, I don't want to keep you any longer. Here's my conversation with Silke Glaab. And remember, you are on the highway to health, and I'm your guide to get you there.
Are you ready to live ageless? Want to discover alternative health choices, cutting-edge nutrition, and fitness for the entire family? Welcome to Highway to Health Show with your host, Dr. E, the Stem Cell Guy, where Dr. E helps you live ageless. And now, here's your host, Dr. E.
Hello and welcome back to the Highway to Health Show. I am joined today by Silke Glaab, and I hope I said your last name well. Did I?
Yes, you did. You're doing
perfect.
Pretty well.
Perfect. Well, welcome to the show, Silke.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. E, to have me on your show. I'm very excited.
So am I. You see, the whole topic of mental health, we've addressed it in different situations so far here, but it almost always revolves around the fact of mental health around everyday people, right? So we've had a couple of people share their struggles with mental health and with depression and all these different things, but I am very interested in learning your take from your experience of working with high level executives and busy people and business people and in general. Why is it so important to address and to look at mental health even in these circles?
Yeah, in very high executives, it's still really a stigma. You rarely get them. So I actually work more with entrepreneurs or founders or solopreneurs and experts. And what I realized that in this realm, it's still a stigma. Some people have started now to talk about it. And you also have to see that, especially entrepreneurship, being on your own or starting something, involves a lot of and quite a number of mental health issues. They have their roots in stress, how your body can cope with a stressful environment. In such an environment, you have you're depending on funds, and funds are not going through. You have a high workload, especially in the early years, or out of sudden, your business is not moving forward. Yeah, and often a business also fails. That's also a traumatic event. Yeah, you have invested a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of money, and then it doesn't work and it fails. This is like losing someone. Yeah, it's a time of mourning. It's a traumatic event, and you have lots of sources in such an environment. Yeah, maybe even your whole lifestyle changed. You put in a lot of working hours. You're not eating enough. You may disconnect from former friends because you invest so much. And then only something has to happen, and then you collapse.
I see.
And that's, so to say, where I would or where I have my focus on. When stress becomes more than stress. Maybe you start with a burnout, and if you don't address that one, it can go into depression and anxiety.
I see. And but before we get into all that, and that's incredibly important and necessary, because you're absolutely right. I think that we've gotten to a point where we're surrounding ourselves with stressful situations because there's a lot of a lot of things that we want to achieve. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of challenges in front of us. A lot of the times we also put ourselves unpurposefully, but we put ourselves in these stressful situations. So it's very, very important to have somebody that we can talk to or that can help us address these things and overcome them. But before we get into that, why don't you share with us a little bit about your background? What got you into this whole thing?
Yeah, so my background, I actually studied psychology, and I had my master's in organizational psychology. But then I stayed more on training and coaching. I was a trainings manager in a very huge call center in Germany. Then I went to Kenya as a development worker. It was community work. Then I worked in the private sector, in schooling, in education. And there I could also see already roots, why people maybe in adult life don't function as they could be. And then I really specialized on this kind of coaching for experts, entrepreneurs, and executives. And maybe a personal story why in the end I focus now on this kind of group, because my parents, they had ages, centuries back, they had a hotel, like a family business. It ran very well for 14 years until it hit a financial crisis, really a big financial crisis. And my mother was not able anymore to cope with it. And having 3 kids, and one day I can still remember in the living room, the brown carpet was then covered with all the blue accounting books, which he had thrown on the floor and just said, "I'm out." And this not only meant that she was out of the business, but also she had to really take care of her mental health. She was out of the business nearly for eight years just to recover from it. And then I realized how important mental health is if you run a business for yourself, and how easily you can be triggered by outside events. So it can trigger a mental health issue.
Absolutely, for sure. You're absolutely right. And I think in part of the reason why I was so interested in having you come over here to the show and talk about these things is exactly that, because a lot of the times we don't realize that many of our successes and our failures don't necessarily have to do with our skill in terms of what we're currently achieving. I work a lot in my business, the one that actually pays the bills. I work with I work with doctors, with other healthcare professionals, and we train them and we show them, we help them with their branding and their marketing and all of these things. And in reality, a lot of the times they start feeling burnout when their practices aren't working. They start feeling like a failure because they've gone through all these years of schooling. They have all this training. They have all of these skills, all of these hours. They have the stress of a lot of times surgeons. They have literally people's lives in their hands, yet
Yes.
their businesses aren't moving forward. And it doesn't have to do what one of the things that we try to emphasize is that is not a reflection of your skill set as a doctor. That is
Yes.
a completely different skill set that you have to develop. Is this something that you also see a lot of?
Yes, because you start very well, and maybe even for some years it goes very well, and then you invest even more, you grow, because you say, I'm in this stage and now I'm growing, and out of sudden there are no clients anymore, or you have the returns are not coming back. Yeah. And then you feel, because if you have your own business, a failure of your business, it's very much attached to you. If you're employed with someone, maybe there's some social compensation and you can just leave that company and apply somewhere else. But if it's your own, there's also financial things, and money is one of the key sources why people get stressed. And then it's also something you believe your business is a reflection of your own personality, a reflection like your own child. And now you see your child is not improving, it's not growing. And then you attribute it to yourself and you say, yeah, it's the business is failing, so I am failing. And there's maybe also a personality type behind it, someone who is a high achiever. And then out of sudden you see you achieved high grades in medical school and in other university degrees. And here out of sudden, you don't achieve something, you get the opposite. And that's something really difficult to comprehend.
Exactly. Because like we're very well saying, and it can be a doctor because that's what I normally see, but it can also be like a high level executive, a programmer, a pretty much anyone, accountant, a lawyer. When they start having all these struggles, like your parents, the story that you shared about your mom, and the fact that they started getting burnt out had nothing, or that their business was struggling, had little to do with their skill at what they had to do for that one job, and a lot to
Yes.
do with caring for their mental well-being, because they were not showing up well prepared, right? They were not showing up in a meaningful state.
Yes, and then there comes also something that's rarely discussed. It's something, how strong is your stress response system? And this stress response system is already developed in your mother's womb. When your mother had a lot of stress, these chemicals, these hormones are released in the bloodstream and also reach you. And your brain is growing, and that also has influence. Then you can compensate for it when you come on earth. If you have a good attachment to your caregivers. So if your parents help you how to deal with emotions, how to regulate back certain emotions. If this stage is also already weak and you have experienced other events in your life, in your early childhood, maybe there was a divorce of parents, or you were bullied, or there was a person in your family who was very ill, or separation in one way. These are actually, again, traumatic events, or you were abused emotionally, physically, sexually, whatever. This also has an influence on your stress response system. Like in my mother's case, she grew up in the last stages of the Second World War. Yeah, so bombs on Germany and whatever. Yeah, there was already a high stress arousal. And then later in life, your stress response system and how you conclude certain situations, that you feel helpless. And of course you were helpless when you were a child. That's normal because you're not an adult and you have limited resources. That's a quite big concept of the psychological side of stress, of burnout and depression. That's learned helplessness.
Of course, and I think you bring up a very valuable point, and it is, and something that actually our listeners are going to be very receptive to, and it is, how is our lack of control of our emotions and our emotional intelligence in general, how is that affecting our children growing up? Because a lot of the times
Yes.
we are super stressed trying to shield them from all these things, but in reality they're still learning
You,
to respond that
yes,
way, correct?
yes. They learn how you react to certain situations, and if the parents are stressed and dealing with their own issue, you don't have also the time to attach to your kids. And this is what I like, growing up in such an environment. I can say luckily the first 6 years they were quite healthy, but then from that time on it was really a havoc on everything. And if I didn't have at least a certain base, it would have been really a struggle, because that's also the energy you create in your household. If you have financial problems, even if you try to shield that from your kids, the energy is still there. You can't pretend. Yeah, they sense that you are stressed, and even how you are like being attached to your child when it's
Hmm.
still a baby. This also has influence. The child is learning from you how to regulate his or her emotions.
Yeah, that's
And then later in life, you have to learn it. If you have not learned that, then it's very important to learn that later.
is this what most experts and most people refer to as emotional intelligence?
I think the concept of emotional intelligence is a little, it's wider.
Okay.
It's like how you regulate your own and how you can be empathic to other people. I would more say it's a skill how to self-control yourself. And in school, they try to teach that to kids. It's a form of aggression prevention programs that you teach children. It's also quite common in the US to teach children how to regulate their emotions. If impulses come, that they know how to regulate it back and then make better decisions or solve problems better, and to speak out how you're feeling at that certain moment.
I see. So that's more in terms of mindfulness and
Yeah,
just being aware of
mindfulness
how you.
and self regulation.
I understand.
That's
So
also something.
how do you start working with people in these regards? Because I think that part of the challenge behind all this shame that is with a lot of mental health issues is that people don't necessarily reach out for help, right? So how do you start working with them? Are you just seeing them when they're completely burnt out and they're like, oh my god, this I do need somebody to help me, or are you starting to see this turn a little bit where people do start reaching out before they get to that point?
Yes, in my case, they're already burned out and then approach me. But I'm also creating a lot of awareness on LinkedIn, on YouTube, just to show certain concepts. Well, what is depression? What is really stress? What is burnout? Because people are not fully aware what it is. And then teach also or educate about self-care, what is very crucial for your own way of living, and then how what you can do on your own to self-regulate back. And another thing is also a kind of self-reflection, and self-reflection is then what I'm doing in my sessions, to really create, go back to the root source, why you have a certain belief about yourself, why you found yourself in a situation like burnout.
I see. I
Yeah,
see.
what I said, it's the psychological side, and then upgrade these certain beliefs. And one of limiting beliefs are often I'm not good enough, I'm not loved, I'm not helped, I'm not supported. And then people find real events in their lives when it was like that, when they felt
Of course.
helpless, and to create awareness, this time is over, you're an adult now, as an adult, how would you now react in the same situation?
That is actually an interesting point you bring up, because it is something that like I said, that I see with some of these other clients that we have, and in our other business, and these are like super successful doctors, yet they still
Yes.
have that feeling of inadequacy, of I'm not good enough, or I'm not as good as X, I'm not as good as this other, I can't do that. So
Exactly.
why do you think this happens to us as human beings so much? Because everyone thinks that I'm the only one, and then look at everyone else, they're succeeding. But in reality, it is this feeling of inadequacy that holds us back 99% of the time. So why do you think this is so common?
I think it started already in your childhood, maybe certain comparisons that were made, or you had events that you wanted to do something, but then your parents said, okay, you're still too young for that, or your marks were not so good like other classmates or from your siblings. Yeah, these kind of comparisons. Or if there were certain really traumatic events, that maybe a parent was abused and you wanted to help but you couldn't do because you were still too young.
I
It
see.
can be extreme cases, but also in school, like when I grew up, it was that when you had an exam, the others, of course, did know what mark you had, and then you started, oh, you have an A, oh, you have only a C minus, whatever. And even the teachers often compare with each other, or
Yes.
even in a sports team. Yeah, someone always, or in most cases, told you it was good, it was okay, but still
But
not good enough.
yeah, but and it is surprising how prevalent it is, because even in families, I mean, you have parents that compare siblings with one another, like, oh, you did great, but look at your brother, how he did this, or look at your sister,
Yes.
how she's doing this other thing, or look at your cousin, or a lot of the times I know that parents do it kind of in a way to motivate children, to say, like, you know what, you can do better, because look at so and so, he's doing better, so you can as well. But what you're telling us is that those comparisons can, in a way, of course, they can motivate us, because we hear all of these different examples that say, you know what, whenever I saw that somebody else was doing it, I knew that I could as well strive to that. But what you're saying is that most of us will actually start internalizing some of these things, in certain
Mhm.
areas, and start adopting that feeling of inadequacy, because, well, I can't do it.
And also in school is also, or as a parent, is better to say, okay, you are at that point now. Where do you think you could go? And now we see together how you could achieve it. And that's also a principle they want, even in the school system, not to see the average of the class, but to see each child individual
Exactly.
and see, okay, this child is right now here, maybe compared to the average of the class is behind, but for the child, we set another goal and then we work on that goal and see the individual process of that child. It's starting now. It's starting in the school system, and it's also good for parents to be aware of that, to see an individual and not to compare to others.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, and we see it all across the board. We don't see it just in like elementary schools or even high schools, because, for instance, if you want to get
Yes.
to a good college, you need to have a certain grade, and if you don't make the cutoff, you don't make it. If you want to make the team, you need to be above a certain level, because if you
Mhm.
don't make it, you're not going to get there. So I do think that we live in a world where there is this competitiveness, where you will have to get to a certain point where you will always be comparing yourself with somebody else, because if more than one person are vying for the same spot, then you have to compare yourself. But I think that the mistake that we make is to believe that, or to base our beliefs in terms of what the person next to us can do or has done, in this one particular area. And it reminds me of how Jim Rohn used to say that a tree doesn't care how much the tree next to it grows. It just grows as much as it can, right? It
Yes.
doesn't care if the tree next to it is growing a lot or a little.
Yes, and this is the thing you actually really have to learn. It's not that you as a person fail, yeah? You as the personality, Dr. E, you are not failing. A certain behavior or a skill you have not developed yet, this is may still needed to really reach your goal. And it's really a skill to detach yourself, to see what others are doing, to observe it, to stay up to date and maybe adjust your own goals. But then you really have to focus back on yourself. And the market, is it entrepreneurship, competition is not becoming less, it's becoming higher. Even to get a job, a good job, is very, very competitive. To survive as an entrepreneur, if you see others and how others post, how people put themselves in the forefront, if you always compare, you will end up really depressed. It's good to see, but then focus back to yourself, to your own strength, and follow your journey.
Of course, of course. And it is a great point that you bring it back to your type of clients and the competitiveness that is in these circles, because what I'm trying to get to is the people who are listening to this show most of the time, and because we know this, they're busy moms and dads, and many of them have jobs, and many of them have careers, and some of them do have their own businesses and everything. But I think that we tend to idolize a lot of the times these founders and these CEOs and
Yes,
these developers,
yes,
and the fact that you're bringing it out and saying, you know what, no, they struggle with the exact same things. They have this feeling of inadequacy, they have this stress, they have, because a lot of the times it's very easy for us to say, oh, well, yeah, of course it's easy for, I'm just going to go to the extreme, for Mark Zuckerberg or for Jeff Bezos to do these things. Look at all they have. But believe me, they have stress, and they
yes,
have sources of stress, and they know how to handle them. You look at Richard Branson, and they're like, oh, well, of course that Richard Branson lives a great life. Like, you know what it's like to have all those lawsuits on you and your companies, and to be in charge of all these
yeah,
families, to have all those things. So they have found a system that works, and I think a big part of it has to do with how they control their emotions and how they're in control of their mental health. I think
yes,
that's the big factor between one person and the other. I don't think it's sheer talent. You even see it in sports. You see the golfers, the number one in the world. You see Tiger Woods and number 150. Their skill set is very similar. The things that they can do
yes,
in the course are very similar. The difference is in their mind.
is in their mind. And then there's also luck, of course, yeah.
Well, of course.
And because that's also something we underestimate. And for me to have this, what you differentiate, to have it in your mind, is really to have good self-care, sleep really enough, eat good nutrition. Your neurons in your brain, they need good proteins, they need good fatty acids from olive oil, omega-3s, also from nuts if you don't have an allergy. It also needs this emotional control. That's very, very important. Be together with friends, have a good family life. That's very, very important for you to get a sense of belonging. That's our social brain. And have also activities like, if you're seated the whole day, become active uh, in your free time. If you're very active during your day, then make something like yoga, like Tai Chi, to bring you down. And have like a mission in your life. You don't need to be changing the world. I really believe if you have a good family life where your children really learn from you, and your children are growing up very nicely, you have a good job that really brings you happiness and joy, and you like what you do, then you're on a very safe side. But if you're going into a job and you ask yourself, oh, even Monday comes and I even don't want to go, and I had so much dreams and my dreams will never be fulfilled. See if your dreams can be fulfilled in a hobby. Maybe you don't become an artist and sell paintings and work, but maybe you start to draw for yourself, to make it a hobby. Then you can still fulfill your dreams and you feel very happy about it.
I think it's great that you opened this door. So let's get into the practicality of it. If for those people who are listening to us right now, and what do you normally recommend as the first couple of steps when somebody comes to you and says, you know what, Silke, I'm super stressed. I just don't see how I'm going to get out of this one, because we all always think that this really is it. I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. I'm really at the deepest end. What are your first few recommendations? And you mentioned a couple of things in terms of mental health, for sleep and for nutrition.
Yes. So
what are the first
I
steps?
also asked some questions about their own self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And I already, I use a word that's called sneeze. The S stands for sleep, and for nutrition, the first E stands for emotional control, mindfulness. How are you able to regulate your emotions? The second S stands for social activities, to be really among friends, to meet really up with people. And activity, after the E came the A, activity, like do some sports, go for a walk. If you're not a sport person at all, then go for a walk in nature for half an hour every day. That's also something.
What was that again? Because you said sneeze, but I thought sneeze is SNEEZE.
SNEEA, then S again, social activity, and another E for enthusiasm.
So SNEs.
Sneeze.
SNEs. EASE.
Yes.
SNEs. Exactly. So okay, perfect. Yeah, because I was trying to follow with the acronym, and I'm like, oh wait, there's no. But now I get it.
Yes, so it's sneeze, and this is for your self-care. And another step, what I do with clients, is this honest self-inquiry, to find out why certain beliefs, certain behaviors are here now. From where do they come from? Go back in time, upgrade these beliefs, because they were made maybe when you were 5 years old, 7 years old, 11 years old, and now you're 35 and you're still running on these beliefs. And with beliefs go also certain actions. It's a whole program. You have a belief, and with a belief a certain action comes. Therefore you have to upgrade these beliefs to be able to have new actions.
That's great. And how does somebody go into changing their beliefs? A lot of the times I think it's one of the hardest things to realize and to decide to change. I don't necessarily think that the change itself is difficult. I think that making the decision that a belief isn't serving you and that you need to change it is the hard thing. So how would you coach someone who wants to do that?
Yeah, I would even say before changing or willingness to change, you need to have awareness what's running you. And that's often hidden. So in a coaching session, you really have to find out what is underlying. People come with symptoms. Oh, I'm like this. Yeah, I had one client, he came and he said, I'm totally burned out. I'm already went to a psychiatrist. I'm working with the psychotherapist, but I'm not really improving, and my business collapsed, and my relationship, and whatever. These are the symptoms. And then to create what I normally do in the first session is, so here you are, and there is your depression, and there is this your relationship, and I ask people to consolidate it in kind of objects. Use something like a glass or a ball or a key that represents you, then something that represents your depression, burnout, and your relationship issue. And then we see, first of all, what kind of object you use and what is the relationship, what is the overall picture we see. And that's the first step, to find out what's really underlying. I can also ask questions to go deeper, to see what's beyond. And then if people went to this kind of journey of digging deeper, then they're already willing. Then they say, oh my God, this is running me. This is all what it is. And with this, there is the willingness to change. Because before I ask them, so do you want to continue with this? Or we go back in former events, and then they say, oh my God, I was here, and I could see that I really wanted my father to stand next to me, to be near to me, but he was always out. He was always on business trips. He came home late, and I really lacked the presence of my father. And so I thought, I concluded, as he was not here, that I'm not so important, because if I were important, then he would come home earlier.
Yes. That's interesting, and you're absolutely right. I think about that whenever we moved here to Spain a couple of months ago. My wife and I, because she's from Spain, we were living in California. We moved over here, and one of the things, I mean, I really like it here. But whenever somebody asks me, like, so how are you enjoying it? I said, listen, I really, really like it. I like the way of life. I like that you get to walk everywhere. One thing that I cannot stand is the amount of people who smoke. And it's crazy the amount of people who smoke everywhere on the street, and you're walking and they'll blow smoke in your face. And it's just so prevalent, right? So whenever I bring it up, there's always a smoker nearby, and they'll say, yeah, I hate it. And I wish I didn't smoke. So you're absolutely right. A lot of times people want to change those things that they do. And I believe that being a smoker is part of just having that belief and having that identity, because there's not a single smoker that will tell you, I enjoy being a smoker. They might make they're not.
And they even stay with this long exhale. You're forced to breathe.
Well, exactly.
And
that's
breathing is the best tool to calm you down. And then it's also like you're craving for it. It's already an addiction in your mind. Mm-hmm. And there was this great TED talk where the person asked his clients, now, just smoke a cigarette and be really mindful about it. Smell it, taste it, everything. And then they said, oh my God, it's really horrible. It's just this tear and whoa, yeah. And then people became aware what it actually is. But they just use it just to calm down. It became part of their identity. And it's also an addiction. You're craving for it. If you're nervous, I need something in my hands, I have to breathe.
But the reality is that a lot of the times people think that they're addicted just to the nicotine, and they're addicted to pretty much everything. But what I was trying to get to is the fact that you're right, and that I told you that a lot of the times people don't want to change. And in reality, a lot of times people do want to change, but they don't have the awareness of realizing what belief is making them run through these habits. Because most of the time these smokers have a belief that they cannot quit, that it's hard to quit, that it's impossible, that they will not enjoy social occasions anymore, that they won't be able to enjoy a drink. This is something that has always baffled me. People think like, oh, well, how am I going to enjoy a meal because I always have a cigarette after a good meal? It's like, just don't have it, and it's completely fine. You can enjoy it. Or I can't go out with my friends anymore because whenever I drink, I need a cigarette. Like, really, they don't have anything to do one with the other. So it is about being aware about that belief. And obviously smoking is a very black or white example, but these beliefs are running our lives in so many ways. And whether it is, I don't believe that I can do this, whether it is, I believe that my children are bad behaved or are well behaved, because if that's what you believe, that's what you're going to be seeing more of, simply because you're programming yourself to notice those things, right?
Yes. And if you have entertained this kind of beliefs, then you have also a very strong neural circuit. And then this advises to just change your beliefs, to affirm them. You really need to affirm them for a long, long time, because they have to compete with the old one. And the old one was used with many behaviors before. And therefore I said, maybe affirmations not always work, because the old program is still running. And therefore I opt for hypnosis, because in hypnosis you're more approachable for new suggestions that go into your subconscious mind, and also let go of the old one.
Exactly, because people don't realize that our brain is literally wired in one direction. So when one neuron fires, let's say we have this one belief regarding money, and when that neuron fires, it's always the same pathway, and it fires the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. It's kind of like those little Christmas tree lights that one goes after the other one, and it's always down the same path. And the thing is, the more we believe in that and the more we reinforce that belief, the harder and the stronger it gets. That's why people who believe they're really good at something, they really believe they're good at something. We even look at them and we're like, look at this guy. He truly believes. And like, yeah, of course he does, because that's the wiring that he has been putting on. But the same is true for the opposite. So in order to change it, a lot of the times it takes a lot more than just waking up and saying, well, no, now I'm going to believe this other thing. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it's the push that you need. But I am a firm believer.
Yeah. There's some research, even in the beginning of hypnosis, that they said you have to affirm it like 20 times for 21 days. Like one belief, affirm it before you go to bed 20 or 21 times for 21 days. It takes longer, and then you also have to put certain actions to your new belief to make it even stronger. And there are some laws of the mind, how the mind operates, and something that is familiar will stay. So you have to make the familiar one unfamiliar, and the new one, the unfamiliar one, more familiar. And you have to practice it. You have then consciously choose what you want to believe now.
But in order to consciously choose, you need to be consciously aware of what's happening.
You have to be in your frontal cortex, because the other programs, they're like lingering, not in your conscious awareness. Yeah, they are really down in your midbrain, and they have certain circuits, and therefore it's important you bring it to your conscious mind to be aware what you're thinking in that moment. And either you change that or you use mindfulness to decrease the impact of that belief.
Of course. And we go back to something that we've discussed so often here, and it is that living our life on autopilot, we need to actually get out of it and be aware of the programs that are running us. And once we are aware, we can just let them continue running us so that we can focus our attention on other things. But most of the time we're not aware of those programs that, willing or unwillingly, or knowing or unknowingly, we installed in our heads, and they're the ones calling the shots, and they're the ones making those decisions.
Yes. And for some people, as I said, it sometimes originates in really traumatic events in your life, and then you really have to work on these events. And if it was not so traumatic, but you develop these limiting beliefs, then you don't need too much, especially in a kind of hypnotherapy. You can get rid of these old beliefs quite fast. And even after, it may come that these or similar beliefs are popping up. And then I always recommend that people get really trained in mindfulness. And mindfulness doesn't mean I have to meditate every day 20 minutes or something. It's actually quite easy if you get hold of a certain belief that's not serving you, just to say, I notice that I have this thought. I notice it, and there you bring it in your conscious mind. Or is it a belief that's really distracting you? You can give it a funny voice. Like Mickey Mouse, let it speak like Mickey Mouse, and you say, this again. Or you can say, it's this story again. If you sense that certain beliefs are coming up, you can say, if I had a title for a crazy story, how would I name it? And if this kind of story comes, I'm the weak one. I'm so desperate, nobody can help me. Then you can say, it's this and this story.
I see. Exactly. And again, it's just being in control of our minds. And then
yes,
a couple of things here. One is, number one, being aware of it. And number two, being aware of the fact that we can control our minds, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the other way around. And not because a thought pops into our head. Number one, it doesn't mean that it's true. And number two, does it mean that we're powerless against it?
Yes. But for some people, it's
it is so overwhelming.
Invading that you can't, then you need some help. But for people on living a healthy life, all of us, we have these kind of beliefs.
And the same is true in different areas.
In the driver's chair.
And the same is true in different areas. Sorry to cut you off, because what I'm saying is that I might be very well in control of my business, right? And I believe that I can get over any challenge that comes in, and I believe I can do all those things. But maybe I'm struggling in my health. And whenever I think about my health, I think, well, it's because I cannot lose weight. And I'm convinced that I cannot lose weight. That there's something happening with me that I'm wrong somehow because I cannot lose weight, or I cannot exercise, or I just can't have the patience to be with my children. So in reality, we need to be aware that not because we don't necessarily need help in our business and we got that in control, does it mean that we might not need help to change a bad habit or a bad belief in our personal life, or in our health, or in our wellness, or the same is true for the opposite. Maybe we're super healthy, and we see it all the time. People who are very, very healthy, and then they decide they want to do a business out of it, but they get overwhelmed.
Yeah, then yes.
Business.
You're very, very right. It's you see this life circle, and then you have certain segments in it. It's your work, your business, it's your relationship, is your health, your spiritual life. It has different aspects, and I've really seen people who are strong in all of them.
I'm sure you have.
Yeah, yes. And I think this also makes us human. And my aspect or my vision is that we all grow. Life is a journey, and we are not here to be perfect, but to live a joyful life. I would not say happy, but a joyful life, an exciting life. And when you see even your heart rate, it's going up and down, and this is life. The biorhythm of life is up and down.
Of course. Yeah. And there's struggle and there's everything. I always say that to people because they're like, well, I can't believe that I ran into another challenge, or maybe it happens to us sometimes. I was like, would you go watch a movie where nothing happens?
Yes.
Where the hero wakes up and nothing happens that day, and then the next day nothing happens, and then the next day nothing happens. How long would you watch that movie? So
That's a good metaphor. I love that.
I know that a lot of the times we don't necessarily want to have challenges, but in reality, that's what makes it worthwhile. Because if it was all easy and that utopic, life that we don't have to work and we get taken care of and we do all those things and we just enjoy, we wouldn't enjoy because there wouldn't be a challenge, there wouldn't be that growth and that need to develop ourselves.
Yes. And on the other side is this other notion of that you, out of suffering, out of pain, you come out of stronger. I believe if you talk to people who are right now in this kind of suffering, that's not something they're really aiming for. And I also don't believe that you can develop yourself only out of suffering. I don't believe in
Yeah,
that.
no, absolutely not. You
Yeah.
also do need that
It brings
enjoyment.
a very negative notion and say, just go through all the suffering and then you will be the hero out of it. No, 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 no.
No, I think we need to be aware that life will throw challenges at us, but we don't necessarily have to look for them, or we don't necessarily have to
Yes,
enjoy them either. We're supposed to overcome them, but not necessarily enjoy them. I don't. That's at least
yeah,
not what I meant. But Silke, we've gone a little bit further than a
yes.
little bit longer than we normally do. It has been a tremendously insightful conversation. I think we covered a lot of topics. Most of our listeners know that I'm very big on mental health because I do think that it is the foundation of who we are as people. So being
Yes.
able to stay on top of it allows us to function better and to live our mission better and to impact more people better. So I want to acknowledge you for choosing this as your mission, as your calling, recognizing it and helping all these people, because I believe that if somebody can help entrepreneurs fulfill their missions, and most entrepreneurs' missions is to one way or another improve the lives of other people. So in a way, we're helping their mission and we're helping a lot of other people. So thank you so much for doing that.
And thank you very much to have this very great podcast.
No,
It's
not a problem.
it's a venue where people can listen to this kind of messages. So thanks for being you.
Thank you so much. Now, before we say goodbye, where can people find out more about you, perhaps learn a couple of the things that you're doing, or even maybe work with you?
Yes, so I'm quite active on LinkedIn, and there my name is Silke Glaab. G like Google, A like London, Africa, B like bird, Glaab. Or on my website, silkcelia.com.
Perfect. And we'll make sure to link to all of those in this show notes. Everyone listening, you know how this works. You can just go to the episode's description. You're going to see all the links down below. Whether you're watching on YouTube or you're listening as a podcast, all the links are below. You can just go to our website at dre.show and find the links for this episode, and together with our complete show notes and all the resources and my thoughts about this. So thank you once again, everyone, for tuning in. Before we say goodbye, Silke, one very last important question. Do you have a good time here in the Highway to Health?
Yes, I had. Time was just flying, and this is, I believe, the answer. If you feel
Exactly.
good, time is just flying.
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun. I certainly did have fun. I'm sure that all of our listeners had a great time as well. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. You've listened to Silke Glaab and Dr. E talk about mental health. I will see you here next week.
Thank you for listening to Dr. E's Highway to Health show, helping you learn the science of living ageless. Did you enjoy the show? Please like, share, and subscribe where you listen to podcasts. Dr. E wants to hear from you. Go to dre.show. Again, that's dre.show. Until next time, this is Dr. E's Highway to Health, helping you live ageless.
What a great conversation. I loved talking to Silke, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. What was your favorite takeaway? Please share this episode with anyone you know who's an entrepreneur, business owner, or in a stressful job or position. I'm sure they will learn a lot from this and improve their work life. But what about you? What did you learn from this conversation? Tag me on Instagram or connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know. And by the way, remember that you can find the links to everything we discussed in this episode in the show notes. Just scroll down to this episode's description on your podcast app and tap on the appropriate link. And before you go, remember to check out my new coaching programs at dre.show/coach. See the different options, learn more, ask questions, and decide whether or not health coaching is right for you and your goals. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You've been listening to Silke Glaab and Dr. E talk about handling stress at work. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you here next week. And remember, you are on the highway to health, and I'm your guide to get you there.